So it is indeed an honor to address you on a matter of immense importance tonight, which is social protection, inequality, and youth unemployment in Namibia, infringement on the social contract. This title may appear quite loaded, and you see there's a lot of things being raised in one topic or title, but it precisely encapsulates the multi-dimensional challenges confronting the Namibian society. If anything, we have witnessed during the COVID pandemic, for example, how unequal we are as a nation. The unemployment the unemployed people felt the brunt of the burden the most, and part of the increased youth unemployment we see tonight or today stems from the job losses that occurred between 2020 and 2022. Not that it's all, but it contributed to that. An experience that also opened our eyes, especially when we look at public institutions, such as the Social Security Commission, which I tend to think right now that when we look back to the COVID crisis, seem to be an arm of government that collects from its employed citizens without returns in times of crisis. Tonight, I will attempt to guide you through these interconnectedness or interconnected issues, illustrating how the absence of adequate social protection exacerbates socioeconomic inequality, and inequality manifests as a lack of opportunities, and one of the direct results of lack of opportunities is high youth unemployment. Moreover, I'll also highlight how the dire situation, coupled with other factors such as market economies or market forces, leadership shortcomings, corruption, and economic mismanagement, poses a severe threat to the very foundations of living a good life. Where I am critical tonight, it is not with the intention to trash all government efforts, but so we can do better. So, I do recognize the tremendous strides we have made as a nation so far, and I wish we can only improve on them. In Namibia, as in many other African nations or developing nations, the erosion of public trust in government institutions is increasing. The past 2 decades, for example, have witnessed the troubling decline in youth unemployment here in Namibia. A stagnant economy, despite ambitious development plans, and a huge deterioration in public services, including but not limited to healthcare and education, especially as far as quality and access is concerned. Public resources are frequently mismanaged or misappropriated without repercussions. Local economic opportunities are squandered, and here's what Boaventura de Souza Santos, I don't know if some of you may know him, he says that any system that denies its imperfection is most likely to go on denying its own contradictions. That when you find a system like apartheid, which spoke about upholding humanity and yet it perpetuated racism, how are we promoting justice on one side and promote national development and all of that while taking huge tenders and giving them to Chinese nationals? That is actually living a contradictory, perpetuating contradictions. And sometimes we don't seem to actually acknowledge those contradictions. And also we see political office holders often seem more interested in personal gain rather than actually public service. The consequences of this socio-economic decline are far-reaching, as they undermine the very essence of living a good life, and even what we now tonight will be discussing, the social contract. Now, what is the social contract? I know it's quite a new term probably for some of you, or probably just complex. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. The social contract is a concept in moral political philosophy which signifies the agreement between citizens and their government, establishing the rights and responsibilities of both parties. It serves to prevent anarchy and ensures a functional and harmonious society by assuming that rational restraint is exercised by all. However, when the government, for example, or the state fails to provide its citizens with necessities to shield them against socio-economic shocks, it jeopardizes the contract's core tenets, which are encapsulated in the Namibian Constitution in Article 1, which is democracy, the rule of law, and justice for all. If I may be allowed to be a bit hermeneutical tonight towards Article 1, subsection 1, which reads that the Republic of Namibia is hereby established as a sovereign, secular, democratic, and unitary state founded upon the principles of democracy, the rule of law, and justice for all. I don't know whether we actually do understand why this is the first article. This article sums up our social contract. But it is only possible to live up to it when the welfare of citizens is also made paramount. This places an obligation on the government, particularly, to create an enabling environment for its citizens. It must create a just society in which the needs of the least advantaged among us are met and people can acquire the means to better their lives. That is socio-economic mobility. Democracy is about people. So, how can people uphold the rule of law and democratic principles when they lack access to the basic means for a decent life? Is there any evidence then from what I'm saying of an infringement upon the social contract, or am I just making it up? Now, even those of us who may not know much about the concept of the social contract can deduce that the state has a responsibility and it is failing to fulfill it. The social contract is being infringed by the persistence of socio-economic inequality. Inequality persists due to rigid structures that hinder young people, particularly those from previously disadvantaged backgrounds, from participating in the economy of the country. Let's look, for example, at discriminatory banking systems or practices, exorbitant interest rates for taking a loan in order to have startup capital, or even biased requirements that disadvantage the average youth from a disadvantaged background. Public institutions that should provide financial support for disadvantaged youth or young entrepreneurs are lacking in coordination and have succumbed to neoliberal structures and policies and now are only serving the elite. And we know what happened to the SME Bank. We can also tell what has happened to the Development Bank of Namibia. We recently issued a $70 million loan to a private entity to build a private campus in Windhoek. This is evident in the creation of municipal trade regulations, for example, here in the city of Windhoek, and the NAMRA tax policies that entrench the disempowerment of those in the informal economy. And those of us that are from the University of Namibia, at least where it's very evident, is that recently the informal traders that used to sell just across the university got kicked off by the city of Windhoek, and the university didn't even come to their aid. And NAMRA is even requiring that on your embe, which you now sell, which is the berries traditionally consumed, now you must pay tax on that. Everything is moving towards a particular economic structure that does not allow the hard-working people who simply want to make a living to ever be able to survive in this kind of economy. Is it because the youth are unemployed out of laziness? Or is it because of structures that we have that are not enabling? What we are seeing is a perpetuating of immoral socioeconomic conditions. With rampant unemployment, there is no adequate social protection to shield youth from socioeconomic shocks. And the post-apartheid or post-independent structures appear to be more adept at perpetuating youth despair rather than youth prosperity. We place, for example, men and women who are out of touch with the lived experiences of youth to either develop policies or oversee ministries where they have no guiding philosophy, let alone solutions to address the crisis. In such an environment, young people sadly lose the ability to dream, and that is hopelessness. They channel then their energy into socially destructive activities. And recently, the United Nations coordinator cautioned that Namibia is becoming a fertile breeding ground for terrorism. Now, you may agree or disagree with that analysis, but there is some truth in it. Vulnerability, what we know, begets further vulnerability unless addressed promptly. This is where robust and swift social protection must come into play. While the current social protection policy, for example, is a step in the right direction, it falls short of addressing normative questions about a good life and a good society. I don't know whether any of you have seen actually the social protection policy. Now, I do not know what was the driving idea behind it, but a policy should not be including the figures of money that you have already spent. Okay, that's like a report. And sadly, what's supposed to be a policy that must be coordinated to drive the national agenda for social protection, somewhere on page 24, you no longer can't tell how this will be coordinated. It then becomes fragmented. Somehow it reveals to be a vehicle without an engine, embracing fragmentation. We need something more strategic and visionary than the government's self-congratulatory document. Youth unemployment has reached a crisis point, and we are told that approximately about 50% unemployment rate. The government, as the driver of national development, holds a pivotal role in addressing this issue. And I know we need different people to play, but I'm particularly speaking to the responsibility of the government in youth unemployment and addressing it. Mobilizing state resources to create an enabling socio-economic environment is not only a matter of justice, but an obligation inherent in our social contract. Article 95 of our Constitution clearly outlines the requirements for every citizen to live a dignified life. Yet, it falls short in specifying how social protection against unemployment should be executed. We need to hold the tangible extension of the state, which is the government, to live up to the constitutional motivation and not leave the protection against unemployment to the goodwill of whoever is in government. The level of lack of social betterment, evident in the lack of public morality, the level of lack of social betterment is evident in the lack of public morality that would inspire change. And this is where I come to issues of ethics. And that's probably I teach ethics. To create robust social protection requires a huge degree of public honesty and integrity. Without it, we will perish. Putting qualified, capable men and women at the center of driving our development is crucial. This means depoliticized appointments to key national institutions that need to drive the development agenda. This is a leadership hurdle that Namibia needs to overcome. Social protection policies have an interconnectedness to the kinds of local politics that governs it. Now, surely, it takes some kinds of different politics. One, to conceptualize social protection. Two, it also requires different kinds of politics to implement social protection policies. And thirdly, it also requires different kinds of politics to identify those who would be beneficiaries. And therefore, the same people can't actually be at the helm of doing things, and therefore the need for coordination and getting the skills of everyone around the country or in the society to actually contribute of how this will be solved. Now, we do need, on the other hand, not just politics, but contextually crafted political conceptions that are created with the intention for human development in Namibia. The kind of politics that will constitutionally guarantee social protection to prevent being weaponized to maintain regime legitimization, so that nobody is using social protection as a campaign tool. Vote for me and we'll create youth employment. Vote for us and we'll give you universal basic income. Nobody should be able to use that against another. It must be constitutionally guaranteed for every citizen to access it. Developing sustainable social protection programs require cognitive liberation to create systems in accordance with our social historical realities. This means we need some conceptual decolonization to free ourselves from sloppy politics that have bewitched our minds from being more creative in solving the plight of our youth. By conceptual decolonization, I mean a process of divesting ourselves from unbecoming politics of greed, politics of mismanagement, incompetence, cowardice, mediocrity, ill discipline, to follow a course to its execution, wastage of limited public resources, embarking on mindless projects, lack of thoroughness, lack of coordination. This is an attitude issue where we have not developed the discipline to follow visions through in order to achieve a particular goal. This is terrible politics we have inherited as a nation. And this has nothing to do with which political party you hold to. Youth unemployment is because of our failure to live a disciplined life to execute what we have planned to do. Every act of political and leadership carelessness is an act of infringement on the rights of the less disadvantaged. On the rights of the less advantaged among us. Now, and this is where I come to end. In conclusion, our crisis is evidence of our lack of not forming a vision for the kind of social future into which we would like to live. We need a clear outline of how the economy would be reformed to absorb the unemployed. Our ability to survive as a nation lies in the creation of upward socio-economic mobility and alleviating our youth out of misery. Neither inequality nor youth unemployment can be reduced through vague policies or broad principles of social protection and equality. The social protection needed to redress the intricate web of inequality and youth unemployment requires that there be intentional attempts to give every young person from birth adequate nourishment, shelter, healthcare, education, and an opportunity in life. That is part of universal social protection. Only through active upholding of the well-being of the least advantaged among us can we build a better future for all Namibians. Unemployment, I do personally think, when there are so many willing and able people who want to work but can't find work, is a social crime. Now let me leave you with the words of Stephen Leacock, who was a Canadian political scientist. And this is in the 1920s that he writes this. He says, every democratic government must henceforth take as a starting point of its industrial policy that there shall be no such thing as able-bodied men and women out of work, looking for work or looking for occupation and unable to find it. Work must be found or must be provided for by the state itself. Thank you.